sisters, they're coming on in. Oh, well, we got one of them here. Let's bring her on in, ladies and gentlemen. Cool ass person over here, really, man. This is one of my favorite new friendships in this realm, in this industry, in this area, in this whatever you want to call it. She is just cool as shit. Got to meet her in person over at the what's that? Hold on. Check the sound. How is the sound? Is the sound okay? Guys, can you hear me? Give us 2 seconds. Sound okay? Sound okay? Let me know if the sound's okay, guys. In the chat, give me thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, sounds like the sound is okay. I'll take a look, a listen, gander, but let's bring her on in. Let's bring her on, ladies and gentlemen. One of the coolest new friendships I've had. She's awesome. I think you'll be hearing a lot from her in the next couple years. Growing the shows. One half of the Banks sisters. Courtney is in the house. What's up, girl?
Hey. Sentiment is so the same. I'm always like, I love pasta. You're the coolest. Just the best.
Well, thank you. You're pretty cool, too. It was awesome meeting you at the Rage Against the War Machine rally out there. All my new friends. You met a lot of other guys and girls I hang out with and stuff. What'd you think?
Oh, is it? Oh, there we go.
There you are.
Okay. Oh, I moved the router over there. That's okay. All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So I was just asking you about the Rage Against the War Machine rally.
I think we might need
it freezing. It's going to be one of those days. I'm engineering the show by myself. I'm trying my best to do it. And here I am. There she is. You back? You there? We can't hear you, Courtney. You hit the mute button. you hit the mute button. Courtney. I'm gonna pull up our video, of course. In the beginning of the show, when we were coming on in, I played a song by Arrested Development. Can you hear me, girl? All right. Now, we want you to hit your volume button. What's with the green jackets? You got to put the volume on. Damn. It's just one of those days, man. Courtney, I'm going to remove you for a little while until you get going. But anyways, let's take a look at this over here. We'll pull this up because she's going to come on in. I'm going to share this really quickly over here. All right, guys. So this is Tennessee Representative Justin Jones. He was one of the Democrats that the GOP is trying to expel from the state legislature to protesting gun violence, calls out his colleagues on the floor. For years, one of your colleagues, an admitted child molester, sat in that chamber, no expulsion. Okay, now I wanna mention something really quickly. The fact is that here you are. Let's see when you're there. Can you hear me, girl? Can you hear me? This is getting comical. I'm going to leave you there. We're going to put you up. But listen, I want to point out that I don't want to start with the whole, well, this person did this, so we should do that, right? I don't want to kind of get into that because I don't think it's as important as the fact that he has a right to protest with anybody. He has a right to go march with the kids, even if it's a position you're against, right? Even if you're a Second Amendment dude or girl, and somebody feels the opposite of that, they have every right to peacefully protest. If they're not doing anything harmful for you, they have every right to do so. Now, I agree with him on his ideology here, but he has every right to do so. And this is something that for 2.5 years we heard the Republicans screaming about, right, Courtney? Oh, you know what I'm saying? The left is censoring us. They're smearing us. They're demonetizing us. They're kicking us out of the room. You'll never see Dr. Fauci sit with anybody who's capable, or Adele Bigtree and stuff like this. And they always say that they never will talk with anybody who can push back against them. Well, here they are guilty of doing the same thing. Now they don't like what Representative Justin Jones has to say, Democrat from Nashville, so they participate in cancel culture. They throw him out of the room. The same thing they've been complaining about for the last 2.5 friggin' years. They commit the same atrocity. Courtney, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, when I heard that clip, I can't lie, the person peeing in another person's seat and not being expelled really caught me off guard. I was like, wow, Tennessee gets down. But yeah, it's pretty ridiculous that more than anything we need representatives who actually speak for the people, and I think that it is perfectly within his rights to be able to protest with them. I had read actually that they got expelled because those two didn't apologize or something, and the woman did. I don't think they should have to apologize either. So yeah, it's quite hypocritical. Like when I think right now are in such a battle for freedom of speech and protecting that and fighting against censorship, that for the Republicans to go so hard in trying to get them expelled, it seems to be counterintuitive of what they've been talking about recently.
Absolutely. And you know what? After we play this clip and we talk a little bit more about it, we'll get your opinion on where you stand on the Second Amendment, right? Because that's the thing. Like you did Camp Dada. You considered yourself a lefty, a progressive, sort of like we were, and obviously we're in this kind of different bubble. You went through this whole transition of kind of, you know, talking to people who were normally what you thought be on your side, right? Kind of smearing you, yelling at you. Um, your stories about what you did in Camp Dada and had you hold back. And now, obviously, you've been doing a lot of stories talking about, trans issues and whatnot. So I know the left, in some ways, has cursed you. Then you went to the Rage Against the War Machine rally, and they're cursing you even more. Like, you're out. You're done, Courtney. You lose your progressive card. Leave it at the door. You're no longer one of us Bernie Sanders cucks. You're done. So, but I'm interested to see where you're at when it comes to the Second Amendment, because I know where I was. Me and Fee were like anti-Second Amendment, but hold that thought for 1 second. Let's play a little bit of Justin Jones. I was going to call this segment "What You Talking About, Courtney?" or "What You Talking About, Banks?" Banks, this is because I went and peeled off your guys' Twitter and you put this up, and I always like to talk about things that people are talking about. So let's listen to Representative Justin Jones, and we'll get back. Courtney Banks is with us. Maybe one of the other Banks sisters will join on in. Wyatt Reed will be here later. Danny Shaw should be jumping in. AM Wake Up. We're over on Rokfin and Rumble. Share it on out. That's the best way to help us out. We already got some cookies in the cookie jar from all you lovable people over there on the Rokfin, helping the show out, helping keep the lights on, and helping us eat. We love you guys.
Let's talk about expulsion. For years, one of your colleagues who was an admitted child molester sat in this chamber. No expulsion. One member sits in this chamber who was found guilty of domestic violence. No expulsion. We had a former speaker sit in this chamber who is now under federal investigation. No expulsion. We have a member still under federal investigation. No expulsion. We had a member pee in another member's chair in this chamber. No expulsion. In fact, they're in leadership, but in the governor's administration. And so once again, what you're saying to us, since you're trying to put us on trial, I'll say what you're really putting on trial is the state of Tennessee. What you're really showing for the world is holding up a mirror to a state that is going back to some dark, dark roots. A state in which the Ku Klux Klan was founded is now attempting another power grab by silencing the two youngest Black representatives and one of the only women, Democratic women in this body. That's what this is about. Let us be real today.
My bad. I was checking everything and taking a look at it. But anyways, why did you put that up, Courtney? What's going on over here? I mean, is this about hypocrisy, or is this about something a little bit more, a little bit deeper? Because let's just provide a little context here. This particular representative was marching with the students who were calling for disarmament, right? Gun control, calling to ban assault weapons, that sort of thing. And
Right.
he was marching with them. So tell us why you put this up, and then let's dive into it a little bit.
I mean, I just think he made some great points about the hypocrisy of other members who have done really atrocious things in that body and have never been expelled. And I feel like what he's doing is far closer to his actual job, listening to his constituents. I think so it's pretty ridiculous that he would be expelled for actually doing something political versus these other people, a child molester, maybe they should be expelled. Probably. We rarely do anything about that in our institutions, actually. So just to hear someone call people out like that, I think that our system is missing that level of honesty. I mean, we always talk about civility politics. I hate civility politics. And to me, I felt like this was a good way of kind of shirking that while still being respectable. Like, I mean, he got his point across well, and he just used facts. And I just think we don't see that enough. So whether you agree with him or not, I just think the way he went about it is something that we need to see much more.
I think it's always great to point out the hypocrisy in these situations, right? That is. But I think the biggest point of what should be made over here is that all speech should be protected. If we're not inciting violence against anybody, then all speech should be protected, whether you agree with him or not. And it is hypocritical. I think the hypocritical part, when he was pointing this out, but kind of not hitting the main point, which is the fact is that no matter what, this is the most important thing. This is something that's getting away from us. This is something that the left really doesn't realize. And you saw this throughout the whole time, in which they had their smear campaign, their silence campaign, their censor campaign, their cancel culture. You can't speak to that person. How many times did we hear leftists say this, Courtney? You can't say that. What do you mean I can't say that? I can say whatever the fuck I want. It's what our country's made of. Freedom of speech, right? I mean, so isn't that the bigger point here more than anything? Is that, and it's so crazy to see now the conservative side, right? I hate to play the team sports, but the conservatives for so long was like, how can they do this? This is freedom of speech. This is freedom of a press. Even if I'm wrong, I'm allowed to say what I want to say. What are your thoughts on the fact that we see the conservatives now doing this to the leftist in Representative Jones over here?
Well, before I move on too much, when you're saying we hear you can't say that, I feel like from the left I also hear you can't think that, which I think is very interesting. I hear that a lot. You can't think that. They love a thought crime. But
yes,
as hypocrisy, I mean, I just think it's I mean, we're just complaining about like what's going on with Trump. Like, I find that to be petty, and it looks like you're going after your political opponent in a way in which you can't actually beat them with logic. So to me, I think I don't think that they should have been expelled. I just think that was taking it way too far, and it doesn't look like, it looks like you like freedom of speech, when it's in your favor, and that's never where you want to be when you're advocating for freedom of speech. But seems like that's what both sides do. They're like, I love freedom of speech for me.
Yeah. What I think, you can't think that. I'm thinking that. Okay. And that's true. If you ever watch any of those hearings, when a lot of the times they complain about censorship, they're not complaining about censorship. They're complaining about what's being censored. Why are you censoring Iranian and Chinese information? Why are you censoring Russia and its information? It's like, and that happens with a lot of conservatives. There's only like a little small group of libertarians who are really out there going, the other day, Rand Paul protecting communist speech. Yeah, communism speech, it deserves a right to hear the floor. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's the nuance of what's going on. Once you start, picking out little details on what needs to be censored and how to censor it, you open up Pandora's shit box of everything being censored, and only the state will have the right to say what they want. And you little plebs, you're going to be silenced. And I think we saw that within the leftist progressive community. We come from the same group, right? We come from the same clan, and we saw that, like the thought police. You can't think this way, you can't say these things. It was such a controlled environment, and being a leftist, being a liberal, was all about accepting everybody's thoughts and speech and whatnot. So, that was that's really what we got. Danny Shaw is coming to the show. I know he ain't got much time. Danny, I don't know if you ever met Courtney. She was at Rage Against the War Machine. I didn't introduce you. Danny, this is Courtney. Courtney, this is Danny. This is one of my
How you doing?
comrades that was in Nicaragua. I just met him in where we met in Brazil, right? Goes to Cuba a lot and whatnot. So he's coming to the show today. Danny, we're talking about censorship. We were talking about what happened in Tennessee, the way they expelled a couple of what are they, assemblymen from speaking. They took them out because they went marching with these kids who want gun control. Now, I asked Courtney before we played the last video. I'm interested to hear your point of view, because you're a leftist of sorts. You're an anti-imperialist leftist. But in the States, what is left and right anymore? Courtney, you start off. Where do you stand on gun control in this situation? Do you think there should be a ban on assault weapons? Do you think that they should arm teachers to protect children? Where are your thoughts? Because back in the days, me and Fiorella, we were big time. No, we have to disarm the public. There's too many crazies out there. They can't get guns. What are your thoughts on the Second Amendment now?
I mean, I think everybody feels like I need a gun, right? Doesn't everybody feel like that? I would say like I'm probably more towards, I don't understand why we need like high capacity magazine kind of things for anyone. I mean, still a lot of damage can be done with handguns and other kind of, rifles and things like that. So I would be compelled to hear what the arguments are, but I just don't see any need for like high capacity weapons like that. Yeah, so that's kind of what I think.
Do you think we should arm teachers?
No. And I only say that because I've been seeing so many of these. I'm at my parents' house. I've been seeing so many of these videos of kids getting in fights and stuff with their teachers. And I just could see these escalating. Like, usually when a gun is present, that's usually when more gun violence happens. So I don't know. And then too much with who would pay if something did happen. It's just very convoluted. And I don't think that teachers, they already have to do so much. I wouldn't want to put that also on them. If it has to be maybe just more guards, then so be it. But I don't think the teachers need that much more pressure with the little that they make and the shit that they deal with.
Thomas Massey did point out when Jamal Bauman was doing his little act when he was screaming, "You don't want to protect the American children." This is a dude who's armed the Nazis to the T, billions of dollars. It's okay for little children on the Donbass to get slaughtered, according to Jamal Bauman, but at home, American exceptionalness at its finest. And, Thomas Massey did point out that in areas where there were armed teachers, there's never been a situation of a school shooting. So I'm very intrigued. This is an area, Danny, I'm going to go to you because Marx, I believe, said an unarmed public is not a safe public of sort. He said something to the degree that when you disarm the public, that's an easier public to control. I'm of the belief right now that we aren't in complete digital shackles over here because we are still armed as a society. And that's why we're at the point where we're at. And I believe a lot of these situations, when you look at the situation in Nashville, when you look at the situation, all these mass shootings in schools, the number one thing they all have in common is they all have prior contact with the FBI. I don't mean to get all Alex Jones over here, but there's something to it. There is something to the MK Ultra kind of mindset where nowadays we have such a drugged up society. We have such a society where kids are on fucking edge that you don't even need to MK Ultra them. You can just flick the switch from the other side and set them off and they go do what they got to do. But what are your thoughts on the Second Amendment? Do you think we should start disarming the public? Do you think there should be assault weapons ban? Do you think teachers should have we should arm our teachers to protect our children? Give us your thoughts, Danny.
Yeah, there's so much to cover on this topic. I mean, historically, when we've looked at oppressed communities and how oppressed communities have defended themselves, the original Panthers, the symbol of the Panther came out of Louds County, Alabama, precisely from the Deacons of Defense and different Black liberation organizations fighting for Black self-determination. Certainly, when we talk about the Second Amendment nowadays, they present it as though every American has some type of equal right. but the thinly veiled racism within all of that, that when they're talking about the Second Amendment, they're usually talking about white suburban males or families, and there's different laws for oppressed communities, ghettoized communities. So I think we should study the Deacons for Defense. We should study the Black Panther Party for self-defense, how they approach this question of arming the oppressed, disarming the oppressor. I mean, no one talks about gun control for these trigger-happy police who continue to mow down Black and brown human beings. The statistics continue to be every 28 hours a Black person is killed by law enforcement in this country. In terms of all of the school shootings we're living, we got to peel back sociologically so many layers of alienation, of mental illness, of social isolation. I remember my two sons, 20 and 15, as they grew up, they would be online, you know, playing Call of Duty or whatever, hyper violent video games, but with this internet revolution in technology, you could play with all these dudes who are in Canada or Tennessee or Michigan or wherever. And I would walk by, you know, and they were kind of half supervised, not to tell on myself as, you know, any type of father who wasn't responsible. But I would hear like the N-bomb and all this white supremacist language and making fun of immigrants and Mexicans. And it was amazing to me within that this video game era, the amount of racial hatred, the hate crimes, and with them going after Trump in this you know, gossipy type sensationalistic way, they're just confirming a lot of Trump's rhetoric to be 100% true about the lamestream media. They can't beat him they couldn't beat him in the polls in 2016. Are the Democrats burying themselves again in 2024 with these weak tactics, going after Trump in his private life, but never mentioning U.S. violence against Palestinians? What happened in Libya? All the U.S. Sanctions against Zimbabwe and Vietnam and China, and of course the proxy war in Ukraine. So the most violent purveyor of violence, as Dr. Martin Luther King said, almost exactly to the date, April 4th, a year before he was assassinated, precisely for having these nuanced views of U.S. militarism as the greatest purveyor of violence. The greatest purveyor of violence, this society can only produce the degeneration and the decadence and the fascism that we're living through, because that's what this society is made of. It's a giant, capitalism is a giant school of competition, of hatred, of division, of white supremacy, of xenophobia. So I think we have to tackle that whole context if we're going to have a real rigorous debate about gun control.
All right, let's stay here. Let's talk about this right now, because you said some stuff. It's interesting, and I knew when you come on today, I was going to challenge you about a few things, because, like, you know me, I like to challenge you. A lot of people within the leftist community, Courtney, where we come from and where Danny comes from, and whatnot, they use the term fascism. They use it differently than it's intended right now. Fascism, I can tell you this as being an Italian American, because I know Mussolini and I know you've been looking into him. Fascism is simply corporatism. It's the merger of corporations and state. That's what fascism is. However, the left has tended to use this word differently. They equate fascism with racism. Now, somebody asked me when they were talking about the whole COVID experience, a person that we know, Danny, that she asked me, she says, what's going on with this COVID situation? So much information is coming out. It's 2 years into it. She says, is this a plot and a plan to kill all brown and black people out there? I said, no. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't understand. You mentioned that a lot of black people are killed by law enforcement in this country, and that is true. But more white people are killed every year by law enforcement in this country. Yeah, the per capita, we understand more black people, more percentage of black people and black men are killed than percentage of white men. But getting back to what I told that person who asked me about, is this a plot and a plan and a ploy to kill black and brownie? I say, no. They don't like all of us over here. The ruling class doesn't like any of us. So therefore, whitey got to go too. And in this particular situation, when it came to the vaccine, if you believe that the vaccine was a eugenics program, black people are way more hesitant to listen to their doctor than white people. When you look at the statistics of World War II, how many white men, poor white men, were killed? Millions. You know what I'm saying? So I honestly believe that when it comes to a lot of these conversations, when we talk about fascism and equating it to racism, when we talk about Donald Trump, and I have a question for you because I have your clip, I often say that we need to also pay attention first to who's the oppressor. Because when we come from this whole school that white man is the oppressor and black people the oppressed, it is completely wrong. I'm not saying that white people don't have privileges, but we have rulers. We have a ruling class, and they want us fighting each other. They're the oppressor. As long as we stay divided and we point a finger at our neighbors, then they win. And once again, not pointing out the fact that white people do have more privileges than black people, but what are we really fighting over? Shouldn't the idea say, listen, we need to stop? Because there's oppression all over the board, right? There's oppression of Jewish people. There's oppression of black people. There's oppression of poor people. There's oppression of this religion, of that religion. There's oppression all over the place, but the oppressor is one group of people. They're the people pulling the strings. And that's what I've learned to see is look at those oppressors, right? And understand that our neighbor is not the enemy. So when you use the term fascism, are you using it correctly, Danny? Let me play this clip over here. This is Danny Shaw. He was on, is this Press TV? I just have a clip out on Press TV over here. And he's asked about Donald Trump. Take a look and listen, guys.
Will be more divided with regards to the outcome of this after than it was before it happened.
There's no question. American society is completely polarized around this. Every liberal who watches CNN and MSNBC and reads the New York Times woke up today with a smile on their face. They feel like this is finally vengeance against all of Donald Trump's white supremacy, xenophobia, homophobia, and sexism. And every conservative, every Trumpite woke up today probably buying 3 or 4 more automatic weapons, whether it was in Texas or Michigan, getting ready for what they perceive as a civil war. You know, it does validate Trump and a lot of his rhetoric. Of course, he's coming from the point of view of fascism and the right wing, no different than the National Socialists who were spearheaded by Hitler. But he is an outsider. He is a political outsider. Despite all of the reasons that I mentioned that we can never believe in his agenda, he does have some very real points against Washington, against this swamp. The problem is, how are we going to respect his critiques of the swamp when he's been one of the #1 swamp monsters as a real estate owner who has swindled, hustled, and fleeced how many hundreds and thousands of families?
Mr. Sepling, same question to you. Is this one of those divisive?
It's Danny. So you use the term fascism and racism, right? Aren't the Democrats in America just as fascist, if not? Aren't they tied to all the corporations? Don't they have all the funders? Same funders. And here's my question to you, and I want to hear an answer from Courtney after. Who's more racist, Donald Trump or Joe Biden? Big Bog.
Yeah, I'm glad we can peel back in a dialectical fashion these comments. I mean, it's overblown in one sense to just say Trump and his followers represent some type of proto-fascism. What I was trying to get at, I just got back actually from Germany, and I was on research in Europe. And as you go from Germany to Spain to the Basque Country to Portugal, it's amazing. I was seeing more Ukrainian flags than I was seeing German flags or Spanish flags or whatever country I was in. So just to come back to that proxy war. But I did a lot of research in Dresden, in Leipzig, in Munich. I was looking at the historicity of Jewish resistance and of revolutionary Yiddish land. So I think there are historical parallels to the National Socialist Project, the way they scapegoated people. And when Trump, he came into power on campaigns of scapegoating immigrants, scapegoating Mexicans, scapegoating China, scapegoating Asians. And there's a direct connection for me from this rhetoric, this reactionary rhetoric, this racist rhetoric, white supremacist, white nationalist rhetoric, this rah, 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 the U.S. is the best and they are the other and they are invaders and make America great again. When was America ever great? When it was segregated, when it was, when quote unquote black people were in their place, because that's what they ultimately mean with a lot of that rhetoric. So when I talk about a fascist discourse, I'm talking about a scapegoating goading discourse, no different than what the Dominican government does against Haitians in the Dominican Republic. So August Bebel, one of the founders of revolutionary social democracy, 1848, German philosopher, August Bebel said that anti-Semitism is the socialism of fools. And I think that's the Trumpian appeal, that there's going to be a certain socialism, quote unquote, in the sense that certain sectors of the American working class are going to be protected in a very nativist, very jingoistic, very xenophobic way, but to otherize and to exclude and divide against the others. That's why I bring up the historical parallel with fascism in Germany and Italy and with Trumpism.
I think that as anti-imperialist leftists or people who've gone down to these countries, we understand like there is this form of like, and I'm trying to deal with it, right? I talked to all of my older conservative family members who still think that these countries were shithole countries and they don't want to accept the fact that our foreign policy is all about going into these countries, disabling them, making sure that our corporations steal their resources, and then we thrust our monetary system on top of that. And yet you have both people, both sides arguing at the border. But the reason why I say is really who's more fascist, because when we look at all these coups and we look at all these same behaviors, the left, the Democrats, are just as bad, if not sometimes even worse, than the Republicans. I know you can argue that with Obama and Libya. We can argue that with Obama and Hillary Clinton down in Honduras. We can argue the fact that their policies are just as racist or fascist, if not even more. And don't get me wrong, right now we have this whole situation where the Chinese, the China hawking from the right is just out of hand. I mean, it is ridiculous at this point. And I think it's somewhat subliminally racist because they'll say shit like, Joe Biden took money from the Chinese. No, he took money from a Chinese energy company. It's not like Xi Jinping was behind the thing pulling the strings, and they have a way of lumping it all together because they're anti-communist. And they're not even really full-blown like communists over here. They have this market socialism over in China. This market's working well. Cuba's now adopting that same type of socialism. I like to call it free market socialism. So I get a little bit of that capitalist, people who want capitalism as a form of choice. They don't want to be told what to do. That's how they equate capitalism, is they have the choice, the right to pick what they wanted to pick. So did you have something to say real quick, Danny? Because you're unmuted. You're muted.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought in Cuba. You just got back from Cuba. I was in Cuba recently. It's still a stretch to say that Cuba is going the Chinese route, looking at China as some type of halfway house between socialism and capitalism. But
it is a mixed economy, though. They have free markets there, and Cuba's like 22 sectors of their economics allow privatization in. Well, they're expanding that to 222. Go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think since Raul Castro ushered in these economic changes in 2009, the Cubans are constantly trying to adapt because the war on Cuba, and everyone should check out that YouTube series, The War on Cuba, produced by Belly of the Beast with Danny Glover and Oliver Stone, the amazing director. The war on Cuba is an economic war, and I think you got to see that with your own eyes. Pasta and the Cubans and their economists have had to be incredibly creative and spin on a dime. But the fact that Russia's on the rise economically, in a sense, and in China, 151 countries have signed on to the Silk Road. These types of multilateral economic options give the Cubans a certain hope that these stultifying sanctions, this anti-human blockade that has suffocated Cuba for so long, the fact that we have Lula back in the driver's seat of Brazil, we hear Argentina and Alberto Fernandez, they want to join the BRICS. All the Middle Eastern nations are talking about building the BRICS. We saw the Saudis sit down with the Persians, with the Iranians, brokered by China. I mean, we could have never imagined this post-1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union. And Xi Jinping, in a straight-up middle finger to Washington, is going to Moscow. So it's this international context that I think gives the Cuban people hope. We saw Miguel Diaz-Canel was in Moscow about 2 months ago. So, and it's this rise of unipolarity, of multipolarity, coming really spearheaded by the Venezuelans, who've been so thoroughly blockaded and beat down. And that's what sanctions are. You want to starve the people of a historically underdeveloped economy, an economy oriented towards export and exploitation by the U.S. and the European neo-colonizing actors. The U.S. has tried to punish all of these countries. More than 30 countries in the world are sanctioned, but nowadays there's the club of the sanctioned, and they can find one another. So anytime that Tehran finds Beijing and Beijing finds Caracas, and of course Caracas already knows where La Paz is and where Managua is, and look at López Obrador in Mexico. So I think Cuba was the spearhead, but we now see all of South America and the global South on the move, and that's very encouraging.
I think for us as foreign policy minded people, and the work we do, and you've been doing this work for so much longer than me, I've just I'm at the tip of the iceberg over here going deeper, and I'm going to continue to go back to Cuba. I'm going to be there for May Day, and I'm going to go to Argentina this year and observe their elections. I think it's amazing, but I think in our position that we have a different perspective, because we saw the way Trump had this war on Latin America. I mean, a week before his presidency set to end, he slaps these sanctions back on Cuba. He labels them as a state sponsor of terrorism. He tried to whack Maduro. He hired Elliot Abrams, John Bolton, neocons. We see this here. We hear the way he talks, this anti-socialist talk and whatnot. And once again, the socialism that we see in the United States, right? This cappuccino communism, this culture war shit. It's not the economics and the Marxism we see in the Latin America, where it's all about the worker. It's all about the proletariat. It's all about national sovereignty. It's all about resource sovereignty. You know what I'm saying? So when we see this, we have this little bit different perspective about Trump that we can only say, man, he seems to be getting away with this because it's racially motivated, because the people in his base that he talks to, they accept it. They accept those people as socialist others, right? You know what I'm saying? It's okay to sanction and starve out a socialist communist country like Cuba because they're the others, right? And I think that gives us a different perspective. But just because the Democrats have different rhetoric, right? That doesn't make it okay, because in their policies, man, they're bad. Sometimes they're even worse. I mean, Libya, holy shit. I saw a meme of Libya where 5 black women are all tied together on the ground because there's an actual slave trade going on. But Courtney, while you're here, before you get on out, question, are you frozen again? She's frozen again.
I can go in on the Dems as well, the corporate Dixiecrats. I mean, if I ever come across for 1 second as somehow being soft on the liberals, I mean, my mother would never forgive me, and my ancestral legacy going back to Scotland and Ireland and across the European theater and this struggle against liberalism. No, I think that's what the Obama phenomenon was in 2008. From the perspective of the anti-war movement, we had such massive demonstrations in the Bush years. Then all of a sudden you put this Obama face, this more diplomatic face, this more multicultural face, what have you. The face of capitalism changed. I was actually in Cape Verde the day that Obama assumed office in Western Africa. And even the Cape Verdeans and the Western Africans, they were so enthusiastic. It's a whole new world, and Obama's going to bring us freedom. And what did Obama bring for Libya? What did Obama bring for Honduras? What did Obama bring with all the droning of Yemen and in Palestine and Somalia? So whether it's Tweedledee, Tweedledum, as Malcolm X framed it, and I think we should really pick apart this formulation. Malcolm is more correct than ever. The Democrats represent that fox, and the Republicans historically
in the hen house, right? The fox in the hen house, he can get in there and he cause a lot of trouble.
Yeah, well, the wolf is the Republican, and you can see from far away the aesthetics are more like open racism. Often I'm not trying to dismiss every, I'm neither Democrat nor Republican. I'm pointing out the contradictions in both camps. And if they're so divided across the aisle, but when it comes to Venezuela, they're very united. When it comes up to standing up for a round of applause for Juan Guaido or whatever puppet they try to put into power so they can steal and siphon off Venezuelan oil and gas reserves. You even seen Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez standing up for Juan Guaido and this whole these social democrats of the Bernie Sanders ilk, when have they ever stood up for Cuba or Nicaragua or Venezuela or China or Vietnam?
I gotta stop you 1 second. They all, the squad, the one good vote they did, they all voted against the Renaissance Act. You know, and that's when I was screaming for Tulsi, like, Tulsi, you better get your ass in here and say stuff. They're trying to sweat out and starve Nicaraguan children over here. Do not be silent on this. But really quickly, Danny, just answer my question, though, real quick, and then we'll get to Courtney before we lose her again and she goes to a different room. If you had a gun to your head and you had to vote for Donald Trump or Joe Biden, who are you voting for?
Oh, I'm turning that gun around. You're not going to trap me. I would say I think the Black Alliance for Peace. The Black Alliance for Peace has a very important slogan. The Democrats want war with Russia. Republicans want war with China. Both parties equally, sometimes it's more effective to go the law and order Ronald Reagan route. And then after that, you bring it back to the Clinton era. So it's just politics time again. To quote Dead Prez, one of the great conscious, righteous hip hop groups of my generation. And Dead Prez has that whole song, Politics. Even if Obama wins, Uncle Sam ain't my friend. So it's politics. It's bamboozling and hoodwinking us. And we should go through the record of every president, because they've all been war criminals, whether it was the Christmas bombing of Panama in '89, the 1983 invasion of Grenada. I mean, these arrogant imperialists think they can invade any part of the world at any moment, quoting Elon Musk, to coup whoever they want. We'll coup anywhere, they said. So we live in a world where an Elon Musk is worth some $230 billion. That's 4 times the gross domestic product of the Dominican Republic, of many countries. So we now live in a world, capitalism is so quote unquote successful that individuals have 5 times the economic power of entire peoples and countries.
Well, the only thing I would argue over there is that I'm not one to get caught up in the isms, right? Capitalism, communism, socialism. I always believe it's about elitism. And I always believe there's a ruling class sitting over any system, and they will manipulate and control any systems out there if they want to. And in fact, we pointed out the Chinese kind of mixed economy, where they have like some sectors of their economics involved in capitalism to let the free market come in, but they're controlling certain state entities like healthcare, infrastructure, power, and whatnot. I think that combination of both is the answer. But here's the quagmire we're facing, because I'm the same way. Turn that gun around. You ain't going to have me vote for either one. How do we get across to conservatives that are still stuck? Because I don't like to call them racist, because I don't believe that they are openly racist. I believe they're subconsciously racist, because they were taught, they were programmed, they were educated in the schools. Empire education, as our boy Johnny Mayorga liked to call it, Johnny Tsunami. They were trained to be this way. They were taught to be this way. They were always taught there's an us and there's a them. So what's the challenge? How do we get across to these people? Because I've hit a brick wall right now, because there's still, the party of individual responsibility, the party that is all about, the conservative side, they don't want to take any responsibility for America's past and current foreign policy. So how do we get across to these conservatives or these independent-minded people, thinking people, if we kind of label them a fascist or racist, what method should we use to talk to the people on the right who have an open mind, maybe to understand what's going on? How do we educate them on what we see and get across to them that they've been duped and they've been fooled this whole time? Go ahead, Danny, and then we'll follow up with Courtney.
Courtney, you don't want to go first? I feel like I'm monopolizing the air.
Well, I was struggling with my rural Wi-Fi running all over my house. So my mom picked up the phone, and then I guess the Wi-Fi doesn't work. So sorry. Yeah, I mean, sure. Thanks. I'll hop in. I mean, I live in a rural area. I always have. And, hanging out with Republicans has always been just very normal, natural people who are your friends. You see them, they work at the grocery store, whatever, the bank. And only recently, I feel like, has it become so divisive that you can't even have a friend who is in a different political party. I feel like that's something very recent. And I feel like that's because we don't have hobbies anymore. We don't have, really we put so much of ourselves in our labels that we're not out living lives. And I think a big turnoff to connect to the right is that the left loves these labels. Everybody is a Nazi. Everything is fascism. Everything is racism. And that's not true. Like where I live, you know, if you're a poor working class person, there are plenty of poor people who live in trailers right down the road. Like they have a lot of the same struggles. So I think it's first, like stopping. I really just think that this approach to say that we've gotten to this point of like a lazy, I feel like, analysis of things. So then we label everything as being racist rather than looking at how maybe this structure also hurts other poor white people, and also understanding that we need to be in community with each other. So constantly throwing these labels at people is going to make people tune out. And so I think just, you know, being more normal, having more just normal general discussions about the things that connect us would be a good place to start, because right now we just love to focus on where we don't see eye to eye and making those as extreme as possible.
Danny, she put out a very important point over here. I think there's a struggle between people who are trying to preach racial oppression, recognition of racial oppression, versus a solidarity. What brings us together? I mean, what Fred Hampton would really preached in the Black Panthers back then really preaches the commonalities, the struggle we all have together. And I feel like we've gotten away from that. I think that was evident and clear in the Rage Against the War Machine rally. We saw a lot of people from the Answer Coalition that were upset at what we were doing. They thought that we were having open racist people up there on that stage when we were all just trying to get together for the commonality of ending this crazy, senseless war, where we're not only are we just, we're pushing death and destruction, and we're promoting it and we're funding it, but we're also like not spending any money at home, where we could, a lot of people on the streets, there's a lot, we have close to 750,000 homeless people on the streets, and we're spending that money over there. But don't you think there has been this push to say, okay, we need to focus on racial oppression? And the reason why I think it's done is because therefore you can push aside people who have the same commonalities, and you can be divisive about it rather than say, what's the commonality? Why should we come together? Poor white people, poor black people, oppressed people across this nation. Why don't we focus on that? Don't you think that there has been some sort of kind of plan to make sure that the racism card is thrown in there because it's really more divisive?
Yeah, I think there's a lot there to unpack. And I'm glad you mentioned Fred Hampton. And Fred Hampton said, if you're afraid of socialism, you're afraid of yourself. And, I think it's important to keep all these conversations open. The spirit of Courtney's comments are 100% on point. And that's why I always appreciate, I come from a very leftist training, Marxist, Leninist training. So to meet with you all and expand my own horizons has been important. I think when you talk to everyday people and explain what Nicaragua has represented and what Cuba has represented, what the Bolivians are doing right now, and that there's this Bolivarian project, which is all about South American unity, and that the South Americans don't have to be pillaged and sacked from the outside. And with the leadership of the Rafael Correas and the Evo Morales and Lula as well, and whole new generation of not sellout leadership, but unifying leadership. And that's why, Democrat or Republican, that's why they've targeted these countries with these genocidal sanctions and economic wars and hybrid wars. We have to have those conversations. And historically, racism has been the number one component to divide us. Look how segregated New York City continues to be. Look how segregated, and not just along black-white lines, but of course along class lines. So we have a ton of work ahead of us, and we don't want to dismiss anybody. I come from what we see every day in Ohio and in the Rust Belt with this opioid epidemic. I come from that, social reality. I hear a lot of my own family members with a very gung-ho American exceptionalist, Monroe Doctrine, American dreaming type mentality. And I try to very patiently take a step back. But there's a certain American exceptionalism that is pure arrogance, and I think there's a huge racist component to it. Like, I'll be fresh back from Venezuela. I go to Venezuela once or twice a year to do work. And I'll have family members lecturing me on Venezuela because they watch CNN or they watch MSNBC or they read the Wall Street Journal. And the arrogance to me is like, well, you've never been to Venezuela. You know, you're just going off of what you hear from either the liberal wing or the Fox wing, the conservative wing of the ruling class, both dead set against the Venezuelan people and their resource nationalism. You know, like that clever bumper sticker against the war of aggression against Iraq. And we can't say the Iraq war. It was a U.S. unfettered war of aggression, invading and occupying and sanctioning the Iraqi people. It wasn't the Iraq war. It was the U.S. war of aggression against Iraq. But that clever bumper sticker, how did our oil get under their sand? Reflects, again, this imperial arrogance. And so many of us poor white people, because if we're going to talk about poor white people, we can begin right here in the family that I come from. And it's amazing how ideologically they've turned us against any of these projects of emancipation. Like, you talk to my everyday family members and neighbors and people I grew up with, they're not going to give you one positive word about China or Venezuela or any economic alternative, because they've been so thoroughly indoctrinated by the idiot tube, by the algorithms on social media. So it's really an upward hill climb to raise this consciousness. But certainly any program like yours, Pasta, any opportunity to sit down with our people, you know, for me as a professor, as an educator, it's not what I do in the classroom. I mean, the true battle it's in the classroom as well. I mean, they're trying to shut down African-American history in Florida and Arizona. These are book burners. It brings me back to the Reichstag in 1934. And I don't think that's an overblown historical comparison. I mean, they're banning any type of understanding of indigenous history and Black history. And that's what we have to get up in there and try to create this resistance.
Yeah, and on the other side too, they're trying to indoctrinate kids with a lot of other shit that should be held in the household that the state should never be in charge of. I don't, you know, I'm saying we were going to talk about some of the swimmer. What's her name? Courtney Riley
Gaines.
Riley Gaines, and you know, she went up and talked about this. You know, she was second place to the transgender athlete who took all these medals and whatnot. You know, I can see both sides of the whole situation. And that's why I have this open-minded, you know, kind of mentality where I don't bag on capitalism, because I know what capitalism means to a lot of people out there. It means choices. I mean, they do have this sophomoric, comical view about communism and socialism, but I've always been calling for a mixed economy. You know what I'm saying? And I think that what China is doing right now is just the blueprint of how to, you know, succeed economically as a country. And the way they're going into these other countries, they're going in with their checkbook, right? Not with a missile, with a gun and whatnot. Courtney, before we get to that next thing, and I'm going to get Danny out of, because I know he's got to get out of here soon, because we do got to ask about Haiti. Before the show started, we have like 10 minutes before we're warming up. I played Tennessee to kind of give a little play into what Courtney and I were talking about in the Tennessee legislative body in the assembly. But I also played a song by Boss and J. Cole. Boss is a Haitian hip hop star. He's from America, but he's Haitian. So I want to get an update about what's going on in Haiti. But really quickly, Courtney, just answer the question. If you did have a gun to your head, or you can answer the question, who's more racist, Trump or Biden, or is it equal?
Biden.
Well,
gosh, it's so hard because personally, like, Trump has done a lot of Central Park 5, you know, housing discrimination. He's got a lot of things, but Biden has put his racism into law. So multiple times through various acts, the drug acts, 1994 crime bill. I mean, you know, all of these things. So I would say Biden. Yeah.
You know what? I'm glad you said that. And the reason why is that I don't think that Biden is necessarily more racist than, you know, Donald Trump. You know what I'm saying? Donald Trump with this whole new Mexican thing, man. This shit is just like, you know, I don't give a shit. He's not saying it's racially motivated. He says it's motivated by stopping, once again, the drug cartels coming in with fentanyl. Let's not put any blame or any responsibility on the backs of big pharma and the doctors here who turned our citizens into addicts, who gave them Adderall and all these opioids like it was Pez candy and turned them into addicts. Let's put it on the Chinese and the Mexican cartels. Once again, policy-wise, that's racist. And what I'm trying to say is that some of the most racist things we can do as a society is go around and bomb indigenous people in their own land and not give two damns about it and have the public consent to it. So I don't think it's necessarily that Biden is more racist than Trump. I think the answer is A or B. But I asked that to leftists because a lot of friends we know justified voting for Biden, saying that they were stopping the impending fascism of Donald Trump coming in. Meanwhile, Joe Biden there hasn't been a war that Joe Biden hasn't liked. He pushed Iraq on the floor of the Senate when he was in the Senate. And he even said
Jill Biden just invited the Iowa team that won the NAACP,
second place, LSU won.
To the White House, which I feel like if Trump had done that, many people would have interpreted that as being quite racist. So a lot of that's a microaggression. But yeah, liberals love to do those kind of things and then say oh, I'm not racist. So, I think I also think that there's something different about someone who claims to be there for the Black community and for all different communities of color, and then blatantly making laws that go against that. So, I think, at least Trump doesn't put on a veneer to actually pretend to care. So I think that that's kind of a bit of a difference for me too. I don't like being lied to.
The fox versus the wolf. The fox versus the wolf. It's that
Right.
Malcolm X, metaphor. You're going to appreciate the racist you can see openly versus the one, that white paternalism of these woke Democrats. They think because they put in the NBA a few little murals, all of a sudden that's some type of actual gain against police brutality, against all the police murders. It's just complete window dressing, liberal symbolism. It's sick. We know where we stand with the right wing many times. I mean, for me, because sometimes I'll quiz my students 3-4 months into the semester, and I'll say, hey, you've been listening to me and the readings, and am I here? Am I a Democrat or am I a Republican? And they kind of know instinctively that I'm neither, but they've never heard that you can actually be something beyond that. So for me, that question is almost an insult. Biden, Trump, Tweedledee, Tweedledum, two servants of capital, certainly a different aesthetic, a different orientation, but at the end of the day, a relentless war against any projects of self-determination coming from South America, the Caribbean, Africa, or Asia. Just unrepentant hatred for any alternative to capitalist exploitation. And that's why I think we have such a duty to follow very closely what's happening in China, what's happening in Haiti, what's happening in Russia domestically. They only give us one side. For the audience, have you ever heard one positive word about Cuba? Have you ever heard one positive word about Venezuela? Have you ever heard one positive utterance from the full gamut of mainstream corporate media about Haiti? Everything is negative. And that's the type of work that we try to do. The Haitian leadership, the Haitian anti-imperialist leadership, they led a rebellion in 2021. I was there off and on throughout that rebellion. And they always said to me, Danielle, the most important thing is the ideological war, the informational war. People don't know that Haiti is worth something fighting for. Even ourselves, we've internalized. We want to migrate to Miami. We want to migrate to Brooklyn. What do we have in our homeland? So that's the type of solidarity work that I've tried to do in Haiti, showing the other Haiti, the ancestral Haiti, the collective Haiti, the Haiti that's resisted white supremacy and U.S. imperialism now since the 1804 revolution, a revolution that still has an incredible legacy. The Haitians are the original internationalists. They were supporting the Bolivarian project, the self-determination of Gran Colombia. So there's all these different international connections. And on my way out, because I got a family stuff now, but the future of Haiti runs through Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. The future of Haiti runs through Lima and Managua. It's an international future to the extent that the Haitians can sever this abusive umbilical cord with the core group powers, the United States, the United Nations, the OAS, the same actors, France and the junior neocolonial partners of the US, the same actors who have already invaded full-scale 3 invasions of Haiti in the last century. Now Canada and potentially the Bahamas, they're spearheading a new war against Haiti. There's the Global Fragility Act, which is the legislative language that Biden can use to now try to go into Haiti. It's another example of humanitarian imperialism, the same thing they did in Libya. It was a dirty war against the Syrian people. So this is the anti-imperialist orientation we should all have. And we have to make all these new connections. So to just relentlessly critique China as though this incredible historical experiment had nothing to offer us, to me, is the height, the essence of elitism, of arrogance, of white supremacy. I think we are living through the end of U.S. international dominance, the end of the U.S. unipolar project. And that's a reason to be very, very excited, very, very encouraged. And the Haitians form a vital piece of that.
Well, let's not get too carried away, because I don't think the hegemon is going to go down without a fight, Danny. And I'm fearful that they'll try to start another war. I think they're exhausting themselves in the Ukraine region over there, and they're going to bring it back home to Latin and South America, understanding that the Chinese and the Russians are there. And I think they're going to concentrate a lot of their energy over there. That's why you have either DeSantis or Trump already amping up this kind of manufacturing consent to go into Mexico to stop what's going on with the drug cartels. And really, to tell you, that's the wolf in sheep's clothing, because really, to tell you the truth, it's about their lithium. It's about them being independent. And I think they just want to have a reason to get in there. But I hope when you go to Haiti, you report back to us. Thank you so much. I do feel, and tell me if I'm right or wrong before you get out of here, that there are two countries in particular that the United States Western Empire will never let their boot off the neck. That is number one, Cuba, because of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And that's why I kind of promote the fact that this isn't Castro. This is Canal Diaz, Daniel, what is his name?
Miguel Diaz-Canel.
Yes, Canal. Like, I don't even fucking say his name right. I get nervous and stuff. It's a different leader. He didn't put the missiles on the island, right? So this is a different way forward, like where, some people might justify what happened. A lot of times it's looked at as political baggage. And the reason why I think a lot of lawmakers in Florida, and I'm not using the term gusanos anymore because I want to be able to talk to these people and ask them what their end game is. I think that Cuba is one of those countries that they won't let their boot off. I think Haiti's the other one because of the Bolivarian Revolution. And they're going to show, don't you ever, push back against Western Empire. How dare you slaves revolt against the empire? So those are two countries. And you've always said that Haiti is not poor. Haiti is rich in resources, but it's extracted like it's going out of style. What are your thoughts? Do you think that they have a chance to get the boot off the neck of Western Empire? Or for what you see, what you just talked about, are they gearing up to go back in there again?
Yeah, no, the Canadians have already gone in with their supersonic jets and their warships. It's not a full-scale invasion like the 2003 to 2018 UN Blue Helmet occupation, in which these UN troops opened fire on Haitian popular mobilizations in Cité Soleil and Solino in Fort National. I've interviewed different survivors of the UN massacres. So they try to present to us in the West this, image of the UN and that they're just peacemakers, but it's always been an anti-revolutionary, pro-imperialist project whenever the UN has dealt with Haiti. Right now, it's very difficult for the Haitians to mobilize, especially in Port-au-Prince. There's these gangs that are functioning as the paramilitary arm of the state. In Cuba, you're 100% correct. And it wasn't just the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was a NATO missile crisis. It was a Turkey missile crisis. It was a German missile crisis, because they always tell us that Khrushchev and the Soviets put missiles in outside of Havana. But what about all the NATO U.S. missiles pointed at the Soviet Union? So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. We should unpack the different layers, certainly, of this quote-unquote Cuban Missile Crisis. But I think terminology is so important. So my man Wyatt has arrived right on cue. So glad y'all got to see, Cuba with your own eyes. We need to have more exchanges with the Cuban people. The Cuban people have held strong. When everyone gave up on socialism and the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, the Cuban people's caloric intake was cut in half. They were only getting on average 1,500 calories. There was no soap. There was no shampoo in Cuba. That's what the blockade is, to deprive the everyday people of food, of hope. But somehow the Cubans have held on. It's not easy. You know, I think we have to be nuanced and understanding what Cuban youth and Cuban families are going through every day. But we say, you know, U.S. out of Cuba, shut down Guantanamo, which this liberal Fox promised his first days in office in 2008 in Guantanamo Bay, this military base of infamy and of humiliation and of U.S. imperial arrogance is still right there. So good to see Wyatt. Great to participate. Thank you, Courtney and Pasta, and all power to the people. Peace.
Dan,
Peace.
we love you, baby. We'll see you soon. Next adventure. I'm glad I get to have a show and have all my friends on here. Look at this. I just want to take a picture. I got Courtney Banks, Wyatt Reed, and Danny Shaw. 3 people I love to death. Danny, get on out of here. We'll see you. We'll see you soon. I got to tell you about Guantanamo Bay. There's some shit coming out of the truther community you probably don't know about, but I'll tell you guys another day. That was Danny Shaw, ladies and gentlemen. Courtney, how much more time do you have?
Maybe like 10 or 15 more minutes.
All right. Well, Wyatt Reed has joined the show. Wyatt, I'm glad you put your nice shirt on for the show today. You look beautiful, right? Look at him. Fly. We all got
the only one I had left. Thank you for noticing. Gotta do laundry, and this is the shirt that shows it.
Nice.
Well, let's jump into this whole, because we have it on the doc. Let's jump into this whole was it Riley Gaines situation? Let's talk a little bit about before we get on there. We have Sarah Higman, who's going to be joining the show on Monday. She was at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. I met her at Freedom Fest. She's part of the trans community, but she has, I believe, the site Gays Against Groomers or something like that.
Yours is Trans Against Groomers, I think.
Against Groomers. She's a non-woke, I guess, is that I hate to identify her, but that's how some people have been identified. I just think she's a real cool ass fucking person, and you can talk to her, and she's going to come join the show on Monday. But this has been going on. We've seen this situation. I don't know if this was at a
okay, I'll set it up for you.
City
Okay.
Council. Well, go ahead and set it up. What do we got here?
So Riley Gaines is a swimmer. She competed in the NCAAs last year, 2021, I believe it was, or last year, one of the two. And Leah Thomas was one of the competitors in the meets. And Leah Thomas is a trans woman. Leah Thomas had swam as she's a biological male, so swam as a man, in college up until the year before these meets. And then she was able to transition because the rules changed and compete. And Riley bravely started speaking out about just how she feels, that it's been very unfair, speaking up for women's single sex spaces because she had to share the locker room. And in almost every case I've seen so far of women speaking out about being uncomfortable with male bodies in locker rooms, the women are the ones who get kicked out. The women's are the one who are told to go to therapy. The women's are the ones who get some sort of like ordinance or police showing up saying that they've been harassing people. So, or they're just completely not believed. So I think it's just really important to highlight because especially last night, she spoke at South Florida State University and she was followed by a mob. I mean, just there's no other way to put it, of trans rights activists, and a trans woman punched her twice. And even just this week, I mean, I've seen a lot of different women. A 74-year-old woman was assaulted by a trans woman at a Let Women Speak rally in New Zealand. So it just seems that, we came from this whole situation of having Me Too and talking about believing women and listening to our experiences. And now it seems that when women do want to speak out, they're completely just labeled as bigots, when truly I think, it's about maintaining women's scholarship, maintaining women's spaces, especially because women are a subjugated group. I don't know why we forgot about that, but I think it's important to hear what she has to say about her experience.
And I just want to say that this is really quickly before I pay. This is a very confusing thing for a person who grew up in the 80s as a man, right? I'm not going to use the term cis or anything else like that. As a man growing up in the 80s, as a boy being trained, taught by my mom, we were always taught to protect women's spaces, right? Like you have to protect women's spaces. That's their space. You don't get involved. You protect those spaces. And now we have this whole situation, and I can tell you guys this, and I know that you guys haven't been swimming in these waters, the truther communities and the people I talk to, this is all by design. The social engineers have implemented this in our society because it's so divisive. And that's why I believe when it comes to the Nashville shooting, that was such a psyop, because it is the most divisive thing you can thrust in there and people are pointing the finger at each other. Remember, there was 6 hands or seven fingers. I guess they were naming the shooter as one of the victims or whatnot. And it just enraged people, and they were arguing about this situation. But meanwhile, nobody's paying attention to what's going on overseas, outside our borders, what's happening with Iran and Saudi Arabia, what that means to our finances. So I can tell you this much: the people who I will be sharing the stage with at this event, there's Rebels with a Cause, June 3rd and 4th. The Truth community, they look at the social engineers. It's what I talked to you about, Wyatt. They study the social engineers, right? And these tactics are thrusted into our society because they're the easiest way to break a society, to keep it divided. And that's what this is about. Any thoughts before we play this video, Wyatt?
No, it sounds like you guys got it covered.
All right, let's take a look. This is Riley Gaines.
My name is Riley Gaines. I'm a recent graduate from the University of Kentucky, where I was on the women's swim team. I proudly finished my career as a 12-time NCAA All-American, a 5-time SEC champion. I am one of the fastest 200 butterflyers of all time. But on March 17th of last year, my teammates and I and other female swimmers from universities around the country were forced to compete against a biological male named Leah Thomas. Thomas was allowed to compete in the women's division after competing as a member of the University of Pennsylvania's men's swim team for 3 years. We watched on the side of the pool as Thomas won a national title in the 500-yard freestyle, beating out the most impressive and accomplished female athletes in the country, including Olympians and American record holders. Whereas just the year before, Thomas at best was ranking in the 400s in the men's category. The next day, Thomas and I raced in the 200 freestyle, which ended up in a tie. We went the exact same time down to the 100th of a second. Having only one trophy, the NCAA told me that I would go home empty-handed and this trophy would go to Thomas. And when I questioned this, the NCAA told me that Thomas had to hold it for photo purposes. I was shocked. I felt betrayed and belittled, reduced to a photo op. But my feelings didn't matter. What mattered to the NCAA were the feelings of a biological male. In 1972, Congress enacted Title IX to end unjust sex discrimination in all aspects of education, including college athletics. But by allowing Thomas to displace female athletes in the pool and on the podium, the NCAA intentionally and explicitly discriminated on the basis of sex. Although the NCAA claimed it acted in the name of inclusion, its policies in fact excluded female athletes. But that is not all. In addition to being forced to give up our awards, our titles, and our opportunities, the NCAA forced female swimmers to share a locker room with Thomas, a 6'4", 22-year-old male who was fully intact with male genitalia. Let me be clear. We were not forewarned. We were not asked for our consent, and we did not give our consent. If nothing else, I hope you can truly see how this is a violation of our privacy and how some of us have felt uncomfortable, awkward, embarrassed, and even traumatized by this experience. I know I don't speak for everyone. It's impossible to speak for everyone, but I can attest to the tears that were shed on that pool deck by these poor 9th and 17th place finishers who missed out on being named an All-American by 1 place. And I can attest to the extreme discomfort in the locker room when you turn around and there's a male watching you undress while exposing himself. I can attest to the anger and frustration from these girls who had worked so hard and sacrificed so much to get to this point. Unfortunately, our experiences are not unique. The number of female athletes who have been denied opportunities, again, traumatized or hurt by policies that claim to be promoting inclusion, is growing at an alarming rate around this country. It's simply unacceptable, and the integrity of women's sports is lost.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Wyatt, I know you're going to be pissed at me because I told you we were talking about foreign policy in Cuba and stuff, and I hit you with this shit over here because I know as a leftist or whatever, whatever you call us, I remember we first started talking about this shit, like me and Nico were like, yeah, well, I've been around, women in a basketball team and heard this conversation. It was split. Half the women were cool, the other half were not. They didn't think it was right for certain males to jump in, biological males or whatever. And we were like, but I could see your point of view. We'll sit this one out. But it seems like we've gotten to a point where we can't sit this one out. But
No,
Courtney,
I'm sitting this one 100% out. That's a women's issue. I'm out.
Okay, I would say
we'll
that's
go
actually.
to Courtney. We'll go to
I
Courtney.
would say that that's 100% incorrect. And as a leftist, and if you care about censorship or any of that stuff, everybody should care about this issue, because women are being fired, and men, for saying that they believe in biological sex. I mean, a woman was just assaulted yesterday for saying that she felt that women should have the right, which we fought for Title IX, to be protected and be able to play because of our biological sex. And this is being used as a weapon from the left in order to censor people. I mean, as me and Pasta were saying, like, this is the reason why I'm being kicked out of the left, is because I just think that women should be able to have a fair chance at sports. Like, I mean, the fourth leading cause of young women's dying in the US is still murder. The number one cause of pregnant women dying is murder. Like, we're not that progressive of a country, and women are under attack all the time. And now, when we supposedly live in a free society, women can't even express their opinion or give their own personal testimony. And it is being labeled as transphobic. It is being labeled as hateful. And if you actually care about freedom of speech and coming to the table and compromising, I don't see why at least we cannot, as leftists, say, hey, I don't like the way that you're going about this. I mean, this is happening all over at Ivy League schools. Rather than, staying and watching lectures, these kids are just going and shouting down the people who are supposed to be speaking and chasing them around. And that's just not how you do things in like a civil society. And it's for things like misgendering, I mean, it doesn't help them win their argument, and it also makes it much more divisive. So I think it is time for people, even if you don't think that this is a big issue, to at the very least say that the violence that's being directed needs to stop and needs to calm down, because I don't understand how women who are a subjugated group and we're trying to fight for our own rights, no one's going to say, hey, you shouldn't be punching women in the face. I just don't think that that's that far. But,
Well, listen,
seemingly
I'll
that's
give you this much.
I don't
It's
think,
hard.
but
I don't mean to cut you off, but it is hard to talk about these issues. It's hard to take a position on this, when I don't think the majority of people who are transitioning are violent, are acting that way. But I will say this much.
No, not at all.
The
And
fact
that's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm saying is the way that activists are doing this, and it has been seen time and time again, that now these very aggressive things are happening, and we have to recognize that there's misogyny in this country. And, I saw a Let Women Speak rally where there were Nazis, literal Nazis there at the rally. And instead of the people going after the Nazis, they still went after the women. And so, I just feel like what are we really talking about? Let's actually go after Nazis if that's what we want to do. But it seemingly seems like we're just going after soft targets like women who are trying to be heard. And I just think that in a free society, we should say that at least that's wrong.
I will definitely say that there should be a forum to speak about this in a respectful manner. And the one thing I do see that's really disturbing is the way the attitude and behavior at colleges are at. And then I saw this behavior when the people like Milo would come to town and they wouldn't let him speak, or Ben Shapiro or Charlie Kirk, or, what I'm saying? I would see that type of behavior. And I'm sure that even though we could, somebody might say, well, I don't really have a strong opinion on this. I bet that Wyatt would probably definitely agree with me. The fact is that we should provide a forum to have these conversations in a proper way. Would you at least agree to that, Wyatt, that's been out of control, that the cancel culture has been ridiculous, that we can't even sit down and have a civilized conversation about this? And that's the real, that is a real tragedy here?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. So we're going to play this video over here. You guys, Wake Up, share it out. Let's take a look. This is the harassment she received shortly after.
Are you ready? Are you ready? Yeah, you fucking transphobic bitch. I fucking see you. Trans rights are human rights. Trans rights are human rights. Trans rights are human rights. Trans rights are human rights.
That is crazy, and that is to me one of the most disappointing things, is because we're not even providing the forum or the avenue to talk about these things, and I think it's awful, and I think people's voices should be heard on both sides of the aisle, or wherever you stand politically. Courtney Banks, let's get you out of here. Where can people find you? What's going on with the Banks sisters? I was hoping that Keisha was gonna roll on in here. We miss Keisha, but
she's been listening. She'll say hi. She's
hey, there you are.
are.
You have to you were supposed to jump on here. You're on the thumbnail, so at least now we're staying true to the thumbnail and stuff.
We have to go get. We have
What's
to go
up,
get
girl?
dresses.
You know Wyatt? Keisha. Wyatt, Keisha, the guy with
Nice
a
to
good-looking
meet
shirt.
you.
Wyatt lives
How
in
you doing?
Virginia.
Oh,
So,
really?
Yeah. Wyatt is
The one and only.
Wyatt is cool. Besides this interaction, Wyatt is cool. I'm gonna say for the record, but we'll talk. No,
I'm getting in trouble later for this one.
You'll
man.
get
I'm
in
gonna-
trouble
I'm
later,
gonna
I
be,
know.
what the fuck, pasta?
I know, but basically we've got, tons of reaction videos and stuff coming out. And then I'm going to start my own channel to kind of discuss more of this, because not everybody wants to be put in a position where, other people have to make money and get jobs and stuff. So I'm kind of already got a scarlet letter. So just to be able to talk a bit more from a lefted perspective, and not a hateful or weird, like super Christian perspective or anything, but just like, hey, let's just talk about it. So that's coming, and you'll see us out in these streets with the videos and stuff. So thank you so much for having me.
Well,
sorry, my Wi-Fi was crazy.
No, well, listen, I've said this before. I think you guys are mad talented, and I appreciate the space you guys are occupying, because there's not a lot of leftist females like yourselves that are going to come in here and talk about this in the way you talk about it. And I think it's just so necessary, and it's so helpful nowadays, because that's the only way we're going to get out of this whole situation that we're in. We have cancel culture thrusted upon us, and it's fucking it up. We have to cancel the cancel culture, and the only way to do that is to have robust ideas and discussions, even if not everybody agrees with them. Bank sisters, thank you so much for joining the show. We love you, and we hope to see you soon.
Yeah,
All right, thanks, Pasta.
Have a good show. See ya.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
The Bank sisters, what's going on? Hey, what's up there, Wyatt? How are you, brother? How's everything going, dude?
I'm good, man. I'm just back home, old Virginia.